you ever wondered why that person who doesn't work even half as much as you do is making so much more money? Why the colleague who always finds a way around things got the promotion you wanted so badly? Why it seems like the harder you try to do everything right, the slower your life moves forward? If these questions bother you, you're not alone. Millions of people live this frustration every day, and there's a very clear reason for it. Since we were little, we learned a beautiful story. If you're good, honest, and work hard, the world will reward you. Your parents said this. Your teachers repeated it. Society as a whole built this narrative as if it were a law of nature. But Nietzsche knew something that few have the courage to admit. This story is a carefully constructed lie. The real world doesn't work like a movie where the hero always wins in the end. In fact, it operates by completely different rules. Rules that nobody teaches in school or at home. While you were being taught to be a good person, others were learning the true rules of the game. Boldness beats kindness. Strategic intelligence trumps hard work, and those who understand power achieve more than those who just try hard. Look around you. That colleague who always arrived late but knew how to speak well with the boss got the promotion. The businessman who found a legal loophole to pay fewer taxes prospered, while the honest merchant went bankrupt. The person who knew how to make the right contacts opened all doors, while those who just worked in silence remained invisible. This doesn't mean the world is unfair. It means you were taught to play a game that doesn't exist. They made you believe there's a fair reward system, when in reality, you're being kept in an invisible prison. A prison made not of iron bars, but of something much more powerful: fear of your own power. How many times have you had a brilliant idea but didn't put it into practice because it doesn't look good? How many opportunities have you let pass because you thought, this is too ambitious for me, or they'll think I'm being arrogant? This fear was carefully planted in your mind since childhood. Don't stand out too much. Be humble. Don't bother others. Wait your turn. Fonce. These phrases sound like wise advice, but they're actually the keys to your own prison. Traditional morality doesn't exist to protect you. It exists to control you. Society needs obedient people who follow rules, who don't question too much, who accept their place in line. That's why, from a young age, you learn that ambition is ugly, that wanting power is wrong, that being bold is dangerous. Meanwhile, a small portion of people understand that these moral rules are only for others. They act boldly, make difficult decisions, disturb when necessary, and don't apologize for wanting more. Not because they're bad people, but because they understood that the world belongs to those who have the courage to take it. Have you ever stopped to think who decided that you need to work from 8 to 6 to be considered a serious person? Who said you should wait 30 years to try something new in your career? Who created the idea that it's wrong to make money doing something you love? These rules didn't fall from the sky. Someone invented them, and that someone benefits from them. Society functions like a big factory of predictable people. From early on, you learn to follow the script: study, graduate, get a job, get married, have children, bet on retirement. This script doesn't exist to make you happy. It exists to make you useful to the system. Social rules are like clothes that don't fit you, but that you were forced to wear. They pinch in the wrong places, limit your movements, and make you walk awkwardly through life. But most people prefer to keep wearing these uncomfortable clothes rather than face the gaze of others. Socrates was condemned for challenging the ideas of his time. Galileo was persecuted for defending a new world view. Simone de Beauvoir broke the bonds that limited women to silence. They understood that breaking rules intelligently isn't rebellion, it's creation. These social rules don't maintain themselves. They need powerful fuel to function, the manipulation of your feelings. The system discovered something brilliant. It doesn't need to physically force you to stay in your place. It just needs to make you feel guilty for wanting to leave it. Every time you think about dreaming big, a little voice appears in your head. Who do you think you are? When an opportunity to stand out arises, you feel a tightness in your chest. They'll think I'm being too full of myself. This voice was carefully planted through years of emotional conditioning. Be humble. Don't think you're all that. Think of others first. These phrases sound like advice from someone who cares about you, but they're actually tools of psychological control. They transform your natural ambition into shame, your desire to grow into guilt. The system is cruel in its simplicity. It teaches you to police yourself. It doesn't need guards watching you 24 hours a day. You punish yourself when you try to cross the invisible limits they placed in your mind. Nietzsche called this herd morality, a set of emotional rules created to keep people grouped, docile, and controllable. They make you believe that being small is virtue, that accepting less is wisdom, that not bothering anyone is kindness. Real success has a price that most people aren't willing to pay, and this price isn't money, time, or effort. It's something much more painful: rejection from the people around you. When you decide to break the invisible rules and seek more from life, something inevitable happens. You disturb. Your family starts making comments. Your friends say you've changed. Colleagues whisper that you're getting too full of yourself. People who used to support you now criticize you behind your back. This doesn't happen because they're bad people. It happens because your growth mirrors their stagnation. Your courage exposes their cowardice. Your boldness reveals their smallness. Those who rise automatically embarrass those who chose to stay on the ground. The emotional system works so well because it uses your natural need to belong against yourself. It makes you choose between growing and being accepted. And most people, when they reach this crossroads, choose acceptance. They prefer to live a small and approved life rather than a big and criticized one. But here's the secret that the truly successful have discovered. The discomfort you cause in others is the thermometer of your progress. The more they complain, the more you're distancing yourself from mediocrity. The choice between being accepted or being authentic reveals something fundamental about human nature. True power isn't in dominating other people, but in dominating yourself. And this internal mastery is the difference between those who build their own lives and those who live at the mercy of others' opinions. When you depend on external approval to feel good, you hand over control of your happiness to people who don't always care about your well-being. Each compliment temporarily lifts you up. Each criticism brings you down for days. Your self-esteem becomes an emotional roller coaster controlled by anyone who decides to open their mouth. But there's a completely different way to live. There's a type of person who walks through the world with a firm presence, who speaks with conviction, who acts with purpose, and who doesn't need anyone's permission to be who they are. These people have developed something rare and powerful: the ability to validate themselves. Internal power is the ability to make decisions based on your values, not on fear of rejection. It's the strength to say no when everyone expects a yes, and to say yes when everyone thinks you should back down. It's the courage to build the life you want, even when it means disappointing those who expected something else from you. The world, instinctively, recognizes and respects this strength. People with internal power attract opportunities, inspire confidence, manage to lead without needing to shout. They don't fight for attention because they already have something more valuable: genuine self-confidence. Developing this internal power requires something that most people consider unthinkable: abandoning who you used to be. Human evolution isn't a gentle process. It requires destruction before creation, death before rebirth. You carry within yourself a collection of beliefs, fears, and identities that were useful in the past, but which today are the chains that bind you. That version of you who believed that money doesn't bring happiness may have protected you from disappointment when you were young, but now it prevents you from seeking prosperity. The identity of simple person gave you security, but today limits the life you could have. The problem is that we cling to old truths as if they were part of our soul. We're afraid to abandon them because we think that without them, we'll lose who we are. But the reality is the opposite. You only become who you can really be when you have the courage to abandon who you thought you should be. I'm not the type who makes a lot of money. People like me don't succeed. It's better not to risk too much. These phrases aren't universal truths. They're stories you told yourself for so long that you forgot they're just stories. Personal evolution requires betrayal. betrayal of the expectations others had about you, betrayal of the image you built of yourself, betrayal of the fears that kept you safe and small. It's a painful process because it means recognizing that much of what you believed about life was wrong. This resistance to transformation comes from a deep root: addiction to social acceptance. From early on, we're taught that belonging is more important than being authentic. But this need is the sweetest poison that exists. The desire to be accepted starts innocently. As children, we learn that by pleasing our parents, we receive affection. At school, we see that those who follow the rules are praised. At work, we understand that those who don't question get promoted. Each reward for conformity builds an invisible prison. Gradually, you stop asking yourself, "What do I want?" and start asking yourself, "What do they expect from me?" Your personality becomes a product molded by others' expectations. Your opinions become reflections of what is socially acceptable. Your dreams shrink until they fit what the group considers realistic. Social acceptance works like a drug. The more you receive, the more you need. Each compliment, each like, each moment of inclusion feeds an addiction that never satisfies. You live anxiously to avoid being rejected, and therefore, you adapt your behaviors, hide opinions, and suffocate your authenticity. Belonging to a group almost always requires cutting pieces of yourself. The group that criticizes those who think they're all that forces you to be small. The family that values stability punishes you for dreaming big. The work environment that preaches collaboration teaches you to never disagree. The truth is cruel. You can choose between being accepted or being free. You rarely can have both things. This golden prison can only be broken with an act of courage that few consider: consciously choosing to be rejected, not out of senseless rebellion, but because you understood that rejection is the inevitable price of authenticity. When you live genuinely, following your own values, and pursuing what really matters, you inevitably disturb those who chose to live falsely. Your courage exposes their cowardice. Your freedom reveals their prison. Your authenticity dismantles their mask. That's why being rejected isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're living your truth authentically. When you stop trying to please everyone, some people will walk away. And that's exactly what needs to happen. You can't carry people who only accept you when you're small and harmless. Those who never cause discomfort in others are just hiding. They're living a life so neutral, so without personality, so without conviction, that nobody feels threatened by their presence. You become invisible to avoid conflicts, but you also become irrelevant. What would you do if you weren't afraid of being rejected? What career would you choose if you didn't care what your family thinks? What relationships would you end if you didn't depend on everyone's approval? What dreams would you pursue if you didn't have to explain your choices to anyone? Accepting rejection inevitably leads you to a place that scares most people: solitude. Not the solitude of need or abandonment, but the clean and necessary solitude of someone who is building a new version of themselves. All great growth happens in silence, away from the gazes and opinions of others. When you decide to stop living to please, many people will walk away. When you abandon empty conversations to focus on real goals, some social circles lose their meaning. When you choose to grow instead of just belonging, the world around you becomes temporarily emptier. This solitude isn't punishment. It's purification. It's the natural cleansing process that happens when you stop accepting any company just to avoid being alone. Solitude forces you to confront your fears without distractions. It forces you to make decisions based on your values, not on group pressure. In silence, you finally hear your own voice. You discover what you really want, not what you learned to want. You understand who you are when you're not playing a character for others. Solitude returns you to yourself. There's a deep fear of being alone that keeps many people trapped in relationships and environments that no longer serve them. The fear of discovering that, without social masks, they might not be as interesting as they thought. The fear of realizing they depend on others to feel alive. The truth is that you need to learn to be your own company, before you can offer something genuine to others. You need to become whole alone to avoid seeking in relationships what you should find in yourself. This solitary journey inevitably leads you to a crucial moment, awakening. But awakening to the truth about how the world really works isn't a blessing. It's a burden that changes your life forever. Because when you understand the rules of the game, you can no longer pretend you don't know how to play. Before understanding these truths, you had innocence as an excuse. You could blame the system, complain about injustice, hope that someone would come save you. Now you know that the system was created exactly to work this way. That injustice is intentional, that nobody is coming to save you, because you don't need to be saved. You need to free yourself. Consciousness is cruel because it no longer allows inertia. When you understand that your limitations are largely self-imposed, you can no longer settle into them. When you realize that your mediocrity is a choice, you can no longer accept it in peace. It's no longer possible to hide behind pretty excuses. You can no longer say, "You didn't know." It no longer works to blame others for your choices. Consciousness forces you to take total control of your life. This awakening brings constant internal pressure. You know you can do more, so accepting less becomes torturous. You understand your potential, so wasting it becomes unbearable. You see the opportunities, so not acting becomes a betrayal of yourself. The price of freedom is absolute responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your thoughts, your choices, your fears, your limitations. Everything is now your responsibility. Understanding these truths, however, isn't enough. The difference between those who transform their lives and those who just philosophize about it lies in one word: action. You can spend years reflecting on these ideas, talking with friends, reading more books, watching more videos. You can become an expert in personal development without ever really developing. You can accumulate deep insights and continue living a superficial life. Excessive reflection is a subtle trap. The brain prefers thinking about change to actually changing. Thinking is safe, predictable, without risks. Acting is dangerous, unpredictable, full of chances of failure. But real transformation happens in the physical world, not in the world of ideas. It begins when you close the book and make a decision, when you stop planning and start doing, when you trade theory for practice, however imperfect it may be. The time to act is now, not when you feel more prepared, more confident, or when everything seems perfect. Conditions will never be perfect. You'll never be completely ready. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. The question that defines your life isn't what did you understand, but what are you going to do? It doesn't matter if you start small. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. What matters is that you begin. Because in the end, all these words are worth nothing if you don't do anything with them. Success isn't for everyone, only for those who have the courage to act, while others are just thinking about acting. Your life is waiting. The decision is yours.